Welcome to the Jersey Justice Podcast, featuring your hosts, attorneys Gerald Clark and Mark Morris.
All right, so Ivan Maisel, thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure, Jerry.
You've had kind of a, I don't know the word storied. You're much better with words than I am, but you've had a remarkable, long career.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. Tell us how you all, how your life started, where you grew up. You have been a college analyst, college sports, football, with ESPN and other outlets.
Yes.
Yeah. So go ahead. Tell us how it all got started.
Okay.
Where
Well,
you grew up.
I came by college football naturally. I grew up in Alabama, where it is somewhere between sport and religion. And if I had to choose one or the other, I think the needle would point toward religion. I grew up in Mobile, which is on the Gulf Coast. My parents were born and raised in Mobile. Their parents were both sets of. My grandparents were Eastern European immigrants. Growing up Jewish in Mobile was interesting, and I think one of the reasons that that I became a journalist was growing up, you're kind of on the outside looking in if you grow up Jewish in the South, just by, especially growing up in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't as stark a contrast as my parents went through, but we were still, we were accepted but not included, my generation, I would say. I think that's part of the reason I became a journalist. The real reason was my father was a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And he and his siblings would just start talking about growing up, and I would just be captivated because they were all funny. And it would either be at the end of either a holiday meal. Well, it was always the end of a holiday meal. That's when they all came over. But it might be Thanksgiving, it might be Rosh Hashanah, it might be Passover. But then they would just start telling stories, and I would just sit there captivated. And
growing up,
Yeah.
you say growing up Jewish in the South. That's kind of like new to me. I haven't heard that dynamic before. I mean, was there a large Jewish community in your area? How did they get there? Was there a certain immigration that found their way there? And how did that relate to sort of like the civil rights movement and the experience of Black Americans in the same part of that of the world at that time? And how did that interrelate? And how did you feel? It sounds to me like you're suggesting some sort of discrimination or outside looking in. How did it seemed like you grew up there, so it's all you knew. So what was the day-to-day thing that you would experience, and how did it relate to the greater civil rights movement that was going on in Martin Luther King and down that
okay,
world?
The Jewish community in Mobile, there was really two groups. There were the Reform Jews, the Western European Jews, who got to Mobile before the Civil War, and that congregation was begun in the 1840s. The Eastern Europeans, the congregation I was in that started out Orthodox and is still conservative, they all got there. This congregation began in the 1890s. And if the dynamic of the Reform Jews and the conservative Jews, the Reform Jews didn't want to have anything to do with the Orthodox Jews because the Reform Jews were established in the community, and and these people came in and they had funny accents, and they didn't want to be stereotyped as those people.
So in terms of Judaism, is there a spectrum where it's like Reform is the most liberal, and then Hasidic
Orthodox,
or is the most and then what was the
conservative
other?
is
sort of
conservative. A lot of Orthodox congregations in America, and this is not this is not great history, but it's as I understand it.
Yeah,
you get what you pay for. The Americanization of Orthodox Judaism sort of evolved into conservative. I did not grow up in a kosher house, for instance.
Got it.
But we had more Hebrew in our services. We had Rosh Hashanah is celebrated 2 days, and conservative Judaism, Reform's usually only one. So conservative was sort of in the middle between Reform and Orthodox. So
the Reform had been established in Mobile, Alabama area since the mid 1800s or so.
Right.
And then a new generation came in, more Orthodox from Eastern Europe.
Right. But that's everywhere. That's not just Mobile.
Yeah.
Sure.
And your family was the Reform or the
no,
more
we
recent?
were
more recent.
Yeah,
Got
we
it.
were Eastern European. Talk with an accent. You know, I can do a Southern Yiddish accent.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the reforms that had been there weren't necessarily welcoming and generally speaking with open arms.
Exactly.
So you were getting it from them, and would you also
not over? It wasn't overt, but we just they they were friendly, but and especially for my generation, there was almost no difference.
Right.
But my parents, there was a difference, and like I probably had more friends my age that were Reform than conservative, and to the point that when I was in high school, we joined the Reform congregation because those were the kids I was hanging out with anyway.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but that's far afield. The question you asked about civil rights and Jews and blacks. I mean, it's hard to say, Jerry, for me, because I was born in 1960, so I got it as a child.
Right.
I have early memory, probably buttressed by what my older siblings and parents said, of we had a maid, and that's considered
I think
you're not supposed to say that anymore, but we had a maid, and she worked for us for 50 years, literally. And she took me to a movie downtown when I was 3 or 4 years old, and they, in the movie, gave her trouble about where the two of us sat in the theater. And my mother called the theater and raised hell. And that's the most overt thing I can think of that happened to me that I was part of.
So some of the other patrons in the theater?
No, it was like
the
blacks
management
sat upstairs at the theater.
How did they know you were Jewish?
It didn't have anything to do with Jewish. That was just black and white. Yeah, I was with I was with Rosalie.
Oh, who was African American?
Who was black. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay.
Yeah. And that's 1963, 64.
But why did you feel like an outsider looking in, which made you go to journalism, where you're more on the kind of listening end rather than projecting
journalism's observing.
Yeah.
You're not.
Of course,
I'm not playing the games. I'm watching them. And I think I always felt a little bit on the outside going in. And I've always felt that way. And that may just be my personality. I have an older brother who gets right in the middle of everything, and he has established himself in he stayed in Mobile, and he's one of the the city fathers at this point in his life. Yeah.
You come across to me. I read I read about 60% of the book about your son Max, and that loss. And the name of the book escapes me. I'm looking.
I keep trying to catch his eye.
I keep trying to catch his eye, and I read it starting last night on the plane flying back here, and I couldn't put it down. I mean, I'd say it was a real page turner, except I was reading on my phone, so I guess we would say it was a real page swipe
scroller
or something.
That phrase hasn't caught on yet, but that's good.
Yeah. But the writing is just exquisite. It was so easy to read. Did you? And so you kind of seem like someone that, from reading and listening to some of your things online, that is kind of the quiet genius in the corner, like listening and then articulating on your typewriter or obviously your laptop, what you see, rather than being more of an extrovert out there.
Yeah.
It seems like you're an extrovert in your writing, but maybe not necessarily in person.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I can be loud and annoying in person if I know you, but
Maybe we'll get there later.
yeah. There's hope.
Yeah.
No, I think
once I tell you how much better Villanova is than Notre Dame, maybe
yeah,
we'll get there.
Exactly.
Or Alabama.
Yeah. My wife says that I am an introvert, and I never really thought of myself as an introvert, but I do. I am completely content to be by myself, and maybe that is an introvert. But I think, I always thought of myself growing up as I was very out there and trying to be included and be funny and crack jokes and and I do less of that now. Yeah.
So that leads to, you get into journalism. Kind of walk us through that.
Well, growing up, my sister, I have an older sister and an older brother. My sister loves to tell the story of walking past the bathroom when I was a child in the tub and I was announcing a baseball game that I was just making up in my head. And I was going to be the play-by-play guy for the Atlanta Braves, who came to Atlanta when I was 6 years old. And Hank Aaron was from Mobile, as were a lot of other, Hall of Famers, Willie McCovey, Billy Williams, Satchel Paige, Ozzie Smith. I mean, it's that generation was incredible. So baseball was big in Mobile, and I loved the Braves, and I went to sleep every night listening to them, and I was going to be the play-by-play guy. But I had a teacher my senior year in high school who told me I could write, and so then I kind of started down that line, and when I went to college.
You mean they saw your writings and said you have a gift?
My English teacher.
Got it.
And she said,
like,
you're good at this. You need to, you keep
I can
it up.
attest to that, having spent the last 5 or so hours reading your stuff.
You and Mrs. Welburn.
Yeah.
So that's two. So when I went to college, one of the first things I did was I walked into the school paper and started writing. And it was went to Stanford, and the coach that year, and have grown up with Bear Bryant, who was a demigod in the state of Alabama.
How'd you get into Stanford? I mean, Stanford is like, these days it's kind of impossible to get into.
Yes.
It's on the level maybe harder than some Ivy Leagues. Was it like that back then?
In 1977, it was selective, sure, but it wasn't like it is now. I mean, my SATs were not off the charts great, but Stanford prided itself on geographic diversity. And there were 2 freshmen from Alabama in my class, and the other one was the starting center on the women's basketball team. So, I got in, and the reason I went to Stanford, the reason I applied to Stanford, Jerry, was I didn't want to go to the Ivy League because I was intimidated intellectually by it, and I was intimidated by the weather.
In the Northeast.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And I'm now a 30-year resident of Connecticut, so that worked out pretty well.
Yeah. That story's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, so you grew up in a Jewish family.
Yeah.
Your wife is Meg?
Yeah, Catholic.
And
Margaret Claire.
Yeah. And so you guys courted for, I guess, 6 years or so, and you started
whirlwind 6-year courtship. Yeah.
Right, and it started out with a fling. This is never going to work. I'm Jewish. She's Catholic. But then somehow it did, and this was your writing is awesome. It's really enjoyable, and it's so relaxing to read and not be swiping online and stuff. And the thing was that you won the religion and she won the geography.
Yes.
So when you guys got married and had kids, you agreed you're going to raise the kids in the Jewish tradition, but then she said, we're moving to the Northeast.
Yes, I was working in Dallas at the Morning News, and our son Max was 5 months old, and she said to me one day, I want to move back east. And I said, I don't.
Yeah.
And she just lit into me. I'm home with 2 babies.
Yes,
you're on the
you're
road
not.
all the time. We're going to live where I want to live. And
Yeah.
I looked at her and said, yes, we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I knew I had a losing hand there.
But life is funny because, and I find it in my life too, I think I'm like 53 now, but I look back like maybe when I first got married and where I wanted to live, and you have a certain view of like, this is so important, this is really important.
Yes.
And then years down the road and you losing Max and all that, it just puts a whole new perspective on things. And you're like, why did I fight so hard for the religion aspect of it?
Yeah. No, it worked out. Living up here has been great, and the kids turned out fine. And it wasn't the way I grew up Judaically, but Meg did yeoman's work in helping them, in raising them in a religion she didn't know. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, I it was important to me then. Now I kind of wonder,
I find, because I know some others that, I guess you'd call it an interreligious marriage or whatever.
Right.
And sometimes people might say, well, we're just not going to raise them anything. They're just going to figure it out when they get older. Like in my view,
Yeah.
I think faith, spirituality, and religion is so important because it gives one a grounding. At least it gives me a grounding. And I think, to me, I think it's more important to give children a religion. Just pick one and give them a base, because I think if just my opinion, and obviously I could be wrong, but I feel like if some people don't have a religious base, they're almost like a rudderless ship.
Yes.
If you can't talk to kids and kind of give them a sense of why are we here and what's this all about and where are we going, I think it can make life really hard. So I think like even in a mixed religious marriage, I think it's important to pick a religion for the kids and give them a grounding.
Right. I agree, and Meg agreed, and we agreed. But yeah, I don't. The concept of God, I don't have any idea, and I understand that belief is, it's faith without proof or whatever that saying is. But all religions are pretty constant and similar in the way they want you to live your life and treat people.
Exactly.
And and kindness and being there for others is central, is a central tenet of all of them. And I that's kind of where I am now. I'm almost Buddhist in the way I think now. It just the Jewish food is better than the Buddhist food.
Yeah. I took a class at Villanova called Major World Religions in undergrad. And the biggest thing I've taken away from that, 30 years later, whatever it is, we studied all the religions: Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Jainoism, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism. And throughout all those religions, there's like a recurring theme that there's a higher power, that there's a spirituality to it, the manna, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And a lot of the religions grew up. So like if you grew up in the Tigris-Euphrates area where there was frequent floods and villages would get wiped out, well, God was a vengeful God and God was a punishing God. And if you grew up like in a beautiful area that was pristine and God was a giving God and God provided,
That's interesting.
But there's recurring themes throughout all the religions that, my son Hunter is he's in his first year at Mount St. Mary's Seminary studying to be a Catholic priest. And we'll talk about things. And, I think it's St. Thomas Aquinas gave, the 10 proof of existence of God, and there's it's just interesting because there's recurring themes throughout the different religions of
Yes.
the world. So I think I mean, I'm trying to move from moving from Mobile to Stanford, but we're getting sidetracked on the meaning of life and everything. But that's okay.
Now,
I think it's important. The bottom line is to pick a religion for the kids and give it to them, which it sounds like you guys did.
our rabbi in Connecticut once said to me and Meg, we're all going to the same place. We may be on different buses.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you're at Stanford.
So I'm at Stanford, and immediately dive into the Stanford Daily, and the football coach at Stanford. I have in my head what a football coach is. It's this demigod like we thought of Bear Bryant.
Can I ask you, though, jumping back, did you play sports growing up? Were you pretty athletic yourself?
I was. My father was a high school coach and was a very good athlete, and went back to his high school, our high school, Murphy High School in Mobile, and coached the boys to the 1956 Alabama state title. He was a terrific athlete, low handicap golfer. My brother was a very good athlete. I was blessed with my mother's hand-eye coordination, so I was not as good of an athlete. I did play golf in high school, but as poorly then as I play now. But I loved it. I collected cards. I watched every sporting event there was, and I got the sport. I learned to reading the Sporting News, the weekly newspaper that came out mostly about baseball. I learned to read. Again, the maid I talked about in her lap, because she would bring the Sporting News. She was a big Cardinals fan, so she would bring the Sporting News to the house, and I would sit in her lap, and that's how I learned to read.
Did you play sports like in grammar school? Like
I played
baseball,
Little League.
football?
I played Little League. I played basketball. Yeah.
All right, so I got to get your perspective on this. We're gonna move. I'm gonna try to move forward in time, but since I have such an esteemed sports guy in the whole thing, I got to ask you about this. So you mentioned Satchel Paige was one of your, I don't know if you necessarily said heroes growing up, but that was one of the top guys.
Yeah.
What's the big? And let me see if you're on the same wavelength I am about Satchel Paige. What's the big thing compared to today that stands out about Satchel Paige? He was a pitcher, right?
Yes.
All right, so there's a hint.
Well, he pitched into his 50s, and he pitched hundreds of innings every year.
Exactly.
Year round.
It was the
as
pitch
opposed
count
to
thing.
now. Yeah.
It was the pitch count thing.
Oh, it's astounding. If you look at the stats of the great pitchers of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And they were, Ferguson Jenkins threw over 300 innings one year, over 300, and I think did it more than 1 year. And now if they throw 200 innings, they give them like a marathon medal. I mean, it's they're all throwing harder now, so I think they run out of gas sooner.
Yeah. So this is what I got to ask you about. So
Sure.
So when I grew up, and I know you coached Little League briefly with Max, and you told that story, and he yelled at you on the field saying, "I'm not doing this," and you're like, "All right." You put your arm around the shoulder, and you guys walked off together.
Yeah.
And then I go back to Little League. My Little League experience as a dad was a little different. So I coached. I think one season I coached 3 baseball teams. I coached a Little League team and 2 travel teams, and just. I remember one day I was standing in the dugout coaching like a thing, and the dugout has the fence, the chain link fence, and I'm up against the fence, and I felt like I was in a prison. Like it was too much. That's how crazy we were with baseball.
Yes.
But all our dads, we were just all the dad group, the kind of dad friend group we were in, and we were all coaches. We were a bit crazy about it, and they had pitch counts. Okay, pitch count requirements, and we would follow the pitch counts. And a pitch count is where they limit the amount of pitches the kids can throw so they don't get injured. And all the kids in my oldest son's group, literally all the kids that pitched have all had surgery. My son's had elbow surgery.
Wow.
They've had knee surgery. Some of the kids are in minor league baseball, played D1 baseball. They've all had surgeries, knee, elbow, arm. There was this one kid, and I can say his name. His name's Alex Galvan. I think he's like 6'8", and he didn't really pitch that much in Little League or high school. He was kind of wild. He was an amazing athlete. And his senior in high school, he played baseball at a one of those tournaments, Diamond Nation or something, and the Louisville coach came and said, "Who's this 6'8" kid?" And I think he had just pitched an inning or two. He's probably wild all over the place. This is what I hear. So if I get this wrong, Galvan family, don't hold me to it. But what they loved about about Alex was he never pitched. He had a fresh arm.
Yeah.
So that leads me. I want to get your perspective. You know, I watch college basketball, and one of the guys I was watching on Villanova, he just plants his foot and tears his knee. I have nieces that play, and they got knee injuries, back injuries. When we were growing up, you know, when I was growing up, you would play. You know, I'd play baseball in the spring, I'd swim in the summer. In the fall, I'd play soccer. In the basketball, I'd play winter.
Yeah.
And now these D1 athletes are just, I mean, they're all getting Tommy John surgery, all the pitchers. And to me, in my opinion, it is this, and you talk about it in your book that I read about kind of keeping up with the Joneses, you know, and competing with the next door people. Well, they're doing that in sports, and it's travel. And you got to play 12 months out of a year.
Yes.
And I think these repetitive stress injuries, and I see these kids, like these young D1 athletes with these injuries and these big braces, and they're out and torn ACLs. It's not right. And I think there's some kind of pressure being put on these kids, A, to succeed, B, to play 12 months out of a year, to get it in the air. And I think it's harming these kids. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, we had the pitch counts growing up with pitching. Satchel Paige, for whatever reason, threw, you know, hundreds of pitches a thing. But what's the difference today? Why are there so many injuries? And is that fair to these kids, being someone who's been in college sports these years?
Well, you know, all the evidence I have is anecdotal, but it's also,
as do I.
Yeah, but everything you said is common sense. It stands to reason, you know, that we all grew up playing whatever was in season, and somehow we got away from that, and that's when the problems began. And it you know, it could just be a correlation and not a causation, you know, but it seems like there's a causation there. I would think there is.
Do you think if there was a causation there, that the powers that be, and I know you're on the college football, what's the committee exactly?
The College Football Playoff Selection Committee.
Right.
Yeah,
so we're not going to talk in detail about college football issues related to that, but do you think if there is a correlation generally between youth sports or, you know, interscholastic sports and maybe NCAA sports, that, you know, I know they have rules that you can't practice at a certain time and with the coach and all that. Do you think they should perhaps consider some rules that limit this so these kids aren't getting these injuries if there is a correlation?
Well, the problem, Jerry, I think, is that it's the youth sports industrial complex.
Yes, that's what I want to talk about.
People are making money, you know, doing it, and, you know, the organizers. And there's that, again, well, you said it, keeping up with the Joneses. I've got to do this, you know, quote, to get a scholarship, unquote. I got to do this to have a chance. And college coaches roll their eyes when they hear that, you know, and because if you think about it, the percentage that you're going, the percentage of kids that get a college scholarship is very, very low.
Well, in my little league group, all our dads and the kids, they were all going to the NBA, the Major League Baseball.
As was I.
Of course, they were all getting scholarships. They were going to Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
In our parents' view, anyway.
Exactly.
I'm only speaking for myself.
No. And we all think that way. But
right.
And even if you get a college scholarship, the percentage who go on to play professionally is, I think, 2 or 3%.
Yeah.
You know, so, and the other finer point to put on it is that baseball college scholarships are split. And most of the time, you're not even getting a full ride. Now, that may change under the new rules with NIL and the expanded scholarships.
But to talk about that youth sports industrial complex, though, like my son Jed was a good lacrosse player in high school, and you go to one little thing, and we would get inundated with emails for this college showcase day and that college showcase day. And I heard those showcases, you know, just talking very, very generally, or something of not effective in actually getting someone to look. I heard a lot of times they go to those college showcases for whatever sport, and the coach already knows who they're picking.
Sure. Well, by the same token, and this is a parallel to what you're saying, it's like all the college consultants to help your kid get into a good school. I was my kid's college consultant, because I was on a different college campus every week. I knew them all. So, and the, guidance counselors are overwhelmed. They got, a couple of hundred kids they got to deal with. I remember we had one meeting with our oldest and the guidance counselor in high school, and one meeting about college choices, and we walked out, and I looked at her and I said, yeah, we're not doing it. We're done with her. Stick with me. You'll like my fee structure.
Yeah.
And so it there's a whole industry there, and it's to what end? I mean, it's better than winning a lottery ticket, probably the odds, but it's still very small. And in the meantime, everybody gets caught up in it. The parents get caught up in it. The coaches are caught up in it. And to get back to your point, it's probably not effective and probably deleterious to their health. That's how it looks anyway.
So what do you recommend then to, young parents that are raising young kids? And I mean, I think to go D1 in any sport and to go professionally in any sport, there has to be a gift that's relatively obvious to anyone. And then combined with that gift, you need the right kind of mindset, mental, and then the development of the gift.
Yeah.
But so what do you recommend to parents that have their kids in Little League or basketball? What do you recommend, kind of looking back on it all, and how it should be approached in your experience in college sports?
Have fun. If the kid's not having fun, then what are you doing? Why are you doing it?
Right.
And it's probably better to switch sports physically. That's what you and I have decided, or agree upon anyway.
Yeah.
And it's it's more about the kid enjoying himself and learning something, and it's learning the physical, developing physical skills, but it's also developing relationships with people. Being a good teammate. What is it? Being a good competitor, and that stuff's important, and
Right.
and we all carry lessons from that, into our adulthood.
And I think the commitment and responsibility is important. Dad, I don't want to go to practice today.
Yeah.
No, you made a commitment to the team.
Right.
You're going to see out the season, and if you don't, go to the next one. I think that's important.
That's very important, and but the all the pie in the sky stuff, it's just not. That's silly, honestly. And to be honest with you, Jerry, there are a lot of college athletes that don't have great experiences because it is
They're burnt out.
They're
get
burnt out, and it's a job.
Yeah.
And it's and the coaches, the coach doesn't succeed, he doesn't have a job. So, a lot of them don't care, that the kid is 18 years old and's got got exams, a couple of days that week. You're going to be at practice, and it's hard.
I mean, I got friends of mine that D1 swimmers, and
Oh my God,
the
yes.
shoulder surgeries.
Yeah,
And keep swimming, keep doing butterfly.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a huge physical and commitment and time suck on a kid. And athletes, I'll say this: they are organized, because the college athletes are organized because they don't have a choice, and their grades are better during the season than when they're not competing, because they have so little time in which to study that they don't have a choice but to study then.
Right.
When they're not competing and practicing as much and they have more time, they goof off like the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah. Not you and I, of course, but all those other people.
So do you really think there's only two people that think you're good writers? Your high school teacher and me?
Yeah.
All right. No, wait. So, all right. So on the podcast, when I talked
My mother thought I could write.
all right, there's three. All right, so on the podcast, I told you we have no thing. It's a little bit of an old-fashioned conversation, and so this just popped in my head. And maybe we don't want to go there, maybe we do. But what was the deal with that UPenn swimmer? And if you don't want to go into this, it's fine. but the UPenn swimmer that says, I'm now identifying as a male or
Oh.
as a female, and I'm going to swim and then the swimmer identifies as a male and starts breaking all the records, even though, and then there was the whole thing where I think his name was Thomas or her name, I forget, but he was in, as I heard the story, okay, from someone that was on the same swim team or a competitor swim team, that this person who was born a male says, I'm going to now identify as a female, and now I'm going to swim in the women's thing, was like a fully intact in the locker room, in the girls' locker room, fully intact, naked. And the one girl calls her dad and is like, you wouldn't believe this. And then they said something about it, and then they got in trouble for complaining about that. You have any thoughts about that whole thing? I mean,
I don't know a lot of the details because
but like
it's an unsolvable. It's a Gordian knot. Yeah, how do you? I don't know how you solve that.
A biological male identify as a female, and then play. I mean, that just seems kind of wacky to me.
Yeah,
it just doesn't seem fair. It seems a little
weird. It's probably not competitively fair. And what is it they're trying to do? I mean, at the Olympic level, don't they test hormone levels at this point?
I'm not sure. But
yeah, I think they do. And there are some.
Do you ever watch South Park?
Not lately.
Okay,
yeah.
I mean, you got to put on. So there's, I mean, South Park is. There's a South Park episode where this guy identifies. You can. Jed's probably looking it up, or crack producer today, where you can. So this person identifies as a female. And he's enormous, and he competes like in the strongman contest. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing. And he's identifying male. And then he does boxing.
Yeah,
he does boxing, beats the shit out of the other girls. He does lifting and throw. It's just like,
yeah.
Sorry, but South Park using what is that? I mean, you're a writer, so what is that literary tool when you're use the exaggeration to prove the point? There's hyperbole. Yeah, something like that, where they use the extreme to prove the point. But anyway, anyone that wants to explore the thing, check out that South Park episode.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's I'm for whatever people, if that's what they feel like they need to do, great. Where but where it begins to intrude on other people and what they're trying, I don't know. It's and a lot of people would say, what are you, an idiot? Of course they shouldn't be competing, and I get that, but I just hadn't really thought about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in football.
Yeah.
There were a couple of kickers. Yeah, there were a couple of female kickers, but they were females kicking.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
All right. So since we're doing this stream of conscious thing, so I love college basketball. Big college basketball fan. And then when my kids were playing basketball, in high school or grammar school, I learned about AAU, and you have AAU where, hey, you got to get on that team again, keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, I got in the elite team and this team and that team. And then what happens is, you play basketball, you have 5 players on the court, which gives you about 8 players that are going to play real time. Anything over 8 players, the 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, they're not going to see much playing time.
No.
So the conundrum in AAU is the kids are paying a lot of money to be on the team. The parents are paying a lot of money. So they want to play.
The industrial complex.
Yeah, the industrial complex. So it's 8. So, okay, well, screw you. You didn't play me, or you didn't play me at the time I want to play. So I'm going to go to this AAU team and pay them my money. And it's this kind of revolving door. Whereas when I looked at sports growing up, it was like there was a commitment to a team, and Reggie Jackson was on the Yankees. He went to the A's for a little bit, not sure why. He was really a Yankee, and Yogi Berra was a Yankee, and, they didn't pop around a team to team, so there was a legacy there. And I love that about college basketball, where, my Villanova team, I'm going to see a guy for 4 years. Jay Wright would have a guy sit the bench for a year or two, learn the system, this crazy great system that he had. And then NIL comes, name, image, likeness, where I guess it was the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll bring the Jersey justice part of this into the justice part.
Yes.
The United States Supreme Court said that college players should be paid if that's what capitalism calls for, and they should be able to sell their name, image, and likeness to make money. And by the way, if someone wants to pay them to be on their team, they can be on the team. And now that's been instituted. And to me, it's changed everything, where college basketball is now much more like AAU. Every year, these teams seem to change. They were like,
Yes.
You didn't play me enough, so I'm going to switch. I'm going to go into the transfer portal. So what's that doing in college sports? I mean, it's like, oh, I'm a Villanova basketball fan in 2025 and 2026, or I was in 23 and 24. And now the team's all gone. It's a bunch of new guys from Maryland and, Robert Morris. How's that? What do you think about all that?
Well, there were a lot of the same fears expressed in college football with the advent of paying players and NIL and the transfer portal, getting rid of redshirting. And I was as alarmed as you were. And
again, the guest makes the show, so
yeah.
Please talk. And
No,
I apologize. I'm doing too much here. But just real quick, those players, they were making millions of dollars for those schools.
Right.
So I think in fairness, I'm in favor of players getting paid.
Right.
But can we do something so they're not jumping around so much?
No, you can't. I don't think it can be both ways, because if you're gonna, if they're independent contractors just as much as a coach is, and if they sign a deal, you could set it up, and I think we're heading in that direction where they'll sign, and if you sign, you got to stay, or you sign for X years, I don't know that part.
Right.
But my point is, I had as many concerns about what it would do to the to the college sports as everyone else. And with all those changes and all the hand-wringing and teeth gnashing about what happened to college athletics, college football ratings last year were up. Now, that could just be betting, because in the middle of all this, betting is now legal.
Well, that goes back to the injuries in sports. It's anecdotal. Is it correlative, or is it causation or correlative? It could be the same thing.
It could be betting. It could be the fact that with the implosion of the Pac-12 and now all of a sudden we've got Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, we've got really cool rivalries that we've never had before, and there are more good games than there used to be.
Right.
We get to see Oregon play Penn State. Sorry, Jed. And we get to see
Jed went to Penn State.
Yes. And we get to see Texas play Georgia or whomever.
Right. And
ratings are up. So, the one constant in college athletics through 156 years of it has been evolution.
All right. So you wrote this awesome book. Jed, is this coming up pretty good? So you wrote this awesome book, American Coach, The Triumph and the Tragedy of Notre Dame legend Frank Leahy.
Yeah.
So here's my question. So Frank Leahy was, as best as I understand, and this is me saying it, not you, was an old curmudgeon. The other coaches didn't like him.
He was a young curmudgeon.
A young curmudgeon, but then when he was older, he didn't make it, and he tried to go back to Texas as a coach, but he had bad health.
Yeah.
But his health was all stressed out from thinking about football for 24/7, and he got sick on the side of the field. And then he tried to go back, and then he started giving speeches about the communists or the Ruskies coming in.
Yes.
And it took him.
Well, now nobody has to read the book.
Well, I'm getting it from you. No, you got to read the book. The writing is, your writing is like, it's like a sweet music. I mean, it just rolls off the tongue or the reading it. But here's my question: he got bounced. He was like one of the most successful coaches ever. I think just behind Newt Rockne, was it?
Correct. Yes.
But it took him 13 years to get inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame because of politics, meaning the other coaches just wouldn't vote for him.
Didn't like him, yeah.
But then there was a big push at Notre Dame. I say Notre Dame. You say Notre Dame?
And that's a running gag between my friends and I don't know really why I say Notre Dame, but I do. Both are correct.
All right. So my point is,
Yeah.
his players all rallied to his cause. They loved the guy.
Yes.
Okay. Probably because he was hard nosed. He probably demanded discipline, and that was good for the kids.
Yes.
And we can get into that issue too about helicopter parenting and oh, it's difficult for the kids, so let's remove any adversity from the kid. But here's my question: in today's world, in today's NIL world, could a coach like him have succeeded, or the first time he was hard on a player? Well, screw you, I'm going to go into the portal and leave. Like, could he have in today's environment?
I believe he would have succeeded in today's environment because it was so important to him to succeed. He would have done whatever he needed to do to win a game.
Could he have exceeded with the same methods that he used, though?
Of course not. Kids are different.
Talk about that.
Well, I think kids are different. And I think you coaches of the pre and post war era, and when he coached, could be a lot more demanding, and there was none of this. Coddling's not the right word, but those coaches, and they talked then. Honestly, they talked then about those kids were soft compared to when he played in the 20s. I mean,
you say that like one generation, the next generation always.
We
thinks
all
the
say
one
that.
was,
Yeah,
that's about like when I was going to school. I used to, walk in 6 feet of snow
both ways,
uphill both ways.
Yeah,
6 feet of
exactly.
snow.
Yeah,
Bill Cosby.
Yeah. So, he was willing to, even at that during his career, he was willing to change. He went to Notre Dame in 1941, and this was 11 seasons after Rockne's last year, and Notre Dame was still using Rockne's offense because the two coaches between him and Rockne were scared to change it, or maybe they thought it was the best offense, but politically they weren't going to change it. He understood that it was out of date.
The game was evolving.
The game was evolving. The T formation, which is an essential part of football, going back to then, had come in vogue in the late 30s. A coach at Stanford named Clark Shaughnessy.
Is it a little bit like war, where a new weapon will come and then they'll get countermeasures for it, and then you then have to change the weapon? Is college football
like war?
A little bit like like in terms of
yeah.
So you said the plays that Newt Rockne had, but then the defense would have things to countermeasures. So then you have to change it. Is it a little bit like that?
It's exactly like that. I in the car today coming over here, Rick Neuheisel, who used to be a coach and is now a analyst and commentator on satellite radio and on CBS TV, was talking about, you do what you do, and then you see what the defense does to what you do, and then you have something because that's what what the defense is going to do to counter what you're doing. So you have something in your back pocket to counter that. It's all constantly evolving, and chess and 3-dimensional chess and all that, all those other cliches. I mean, it's true. It's a mind game as well as a very physical game.
Are you as much a football fan? You would consider yourself a football fan, a lifelong football fan,
yes.
Even though a journalist, right? Are you as much of a fan in the NIL transfer portal? Or like, you're not going to talk about if you've had a favorite team or anything because you're on the committee, but like if you had a favorite team or are you as much of a fan in this era when it's changing and what is like what are the San Francisco Giants? Like, what is the Giants and what's a Giants fan? Like, well, what is the team? Like, the team was in New York for years, right? The Brooklyn Dodgers, right? And then they moved to LA. Are you still a fan? And what is the team? Is it the owner? Is it the players? Is it the logo? Is it the location? Or is it just some mental construct we create in our minds to pass our time?
It's the laundry. We root for laundry.
You know what I mean? Because it changes.
It
changes every year.
But that's what. Yeah, that's what.
But legacy's a thing. You know, like Josh Hart on Villanova.
Yeah.
Jed and I would go to the game. Love Josh Hart. He's there. He's always in team, and I always did. And that's why people love Nick Nova. They love the Villanova Knicks because it's like that. It's like that sentimental or bringing back the past, where we're going to put that 2018 national championship team in New York in the NBA with Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and who's Jed? Who else? Mikal Bridges. And then they also had Arch on the team.
Yes.
So could you imagine if they brought back on the Knicks Ryan DiArchiacono, Arch, they got Brunson, Bridges, Mikal, and you'd have the 2018 national championship team playing on the Knicks. I mean, there's a ton of Knicks people. I'm going off tangent here. My point is the legacy.
Yes.
Or are we just watching laundry? Like, what is a team? Giants, they moved to San Francisco. Dodgers, everyone loved the Dodgers, and people were probably heartbroken. Then they moved to L.A. So what is the team? Is it the owner, the players?
Well, I'll answer with a story.
Yeah.
20 years ago, the editor of Stanford Magazine called me and said, "We have the smartest people in the world teaching on this campus. Come out here and ask them why it's important that we beat Cal." It was just a great idea. It was my favorite idea of a story I've ever been given, and I had so much fun doing it. I talked to the dean of religious studies. I talked to anthropology professor. I talked to a professor who studied bonobos in Africa.
Chimps,
yeah.
They're smart as shit, those things.
Exactly. And what they all
I think we're a half a chromosome away from them, but
yeah, exactly. And what it all came down to is we are hardwired as a species to be us versus them. And throw into that
tribal.
We're tribal, and you throw into that part of it the fact that when you go to college, it's when your brain is
at the height of that,
at the height of being impressionable as to who you're going to be as an adult.
And your identity.
Right, and your identity. Who are your friends now? They're the friends you made when you were in college.
Yeah.
And that, so those college experiences are critical to the way you grow up, and that's why your college team means so much to you.
Right.
And it may not even be this college you went to. It could be the college you grew up rooting for. It could be the college in your state. Whatever it is, there's something about college sports, and it's uniquely American for whatever reason. But we are more emotionally invested in our college teams as fans than we are as a rule, I think. And that's different, I think, in the Northeast because college sports, at least college football up here, is not as big. And I know people are diehard Giant Jet Patriot fans. I live in Connecticut.
You missed
I get
the Eagles.
that. Eagles, yeah. Sorry, I forgot I was in Jersey. But
Birds, go Birds.
Yeah, and I will grant you, but again, there is that emotional investment, and then it's not. Then it's more they're representing you. It's not the going to college there. It's representing you. But that's, I just think it becomes part of our DNA of who we are, and that identity is at stake whenever that team goes on the field.
There is an economic component, though, too, if you're rooting for your college team, because if your college team does good, presumably it pumps up your resume because your college is on your resume.
Yes.
So Jed's a recent graduate of Penn State, and if they become national champs, I don't know about this year, Jed. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah.
But
Nice of him to say that.
but you have a microphone there, Jed, if you want to put it on. But if they become national champs and Jed's sending his resume around, oh, you went to Penn State, it pumps up. So it's
Sure.
not just a pure psychological thing. There is
I know, but I don't think kids, I don't think you cling to that when you're tailgating, in front of your dorm,
But older you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when I'm older, I'm more proud of my school because Villanova won the national championship.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Stanford went to the Rose Bowl 3 times in 4 seasons, and both of our daughters went to Stanford, and one of them got 2 Rose Bowls and the other one got 1. And I kept trying, and then they would complain about the football team, and I would go, no. You do not get to complain about your football team. You have no idea how lucky you are. And it wasn't long after that they began to understand. And Stanford football has a long history of doing this,
right,
going up and down. And right now it's down but it will come back. And but it's just, it's a very special thing when they're good. And you're right, you hop onto it and it becomes part of who you are. And look, that's why I never had to get a real job. Yeah, I mean, because people feel that way.
So, are you as much of a fan in the NIL transfer portal era?
I'm not as much of a fan now, but that's from 40 years of watching football.
You're getting tired of it, or
that's why I stopped covering it, because I could tell I was losing my juice in the press box. I could tell it was not as important to me, and that's when I thought. And I had.
What year are we talking? When
2 years ago. I mean, 2 years ago is when the last season I covered professionally was 22, so that was 3 years ago. And in the spring of 23, I would then at that point was working for On3, and I had helped get On3 off the ground. I'm still an investor in it. It's a great website, but I could just tell I was done, Jerry.
What was pulling your enthusiasm away from it?
What was part of it was NIL and the portal.
Let me tell you,
the rules were changing
real quick. Let me tell you a couple of things that pulled my enthusiasm away from sports.
Yeah.
One was in the NHL when they had that weird ass halo following the hockey puck around. Remember they had that going on for 2 years. That like ruined.
Turned the TV off.
People were talking. Like thank God they got rid of that. I'm on the fence on the pitch count clock. I think that's helping out with speeding up the game. But I loved a Yankee game going to 1 a.m. like watching that or a West Coast game.
One.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the one, I guess. But here's what's really killing my mojo for sports. Like, okay, I grew up Catholic, so things that were bad was sex, drugs, cigarettes, and gambling. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So now I can't turn on a show. And the other thing that's really annoying, I was listening to the Yankee game the other night, right? And I want to talk about this too, about how media is changing and AI and things like this. But like, I'm listening to the Yankee game the other night, and I forget the woman's name, Susan, who bounces the Yankees. But okay, it's so many commercials. And then, okay, the count's 3-2. Come to your new blah, blah, blah. And she's giving an ad in the middle of the count. Like, it's just like it's constant advertising.
Yeah, that's hard.
And then the post game is, well, now there's no game going on, so now I can really kill you with the advertising. And the post game is all advertising, the post game show. And then during the show, they're like, "Oh, that was a great game they did tonight. Buy your new squeegee mat down at the whatever." Yeah. And it's just constant marketing. And I could just go click on Chat One Sports and listen to that dude that covers the Giants. Yeah. And there's like almost no advertising. The guy's entertaining as heck. So I feel like the whole social media podcast is changing the traditional thing. But what's really killing my mojo is when the ads are for gambling. I mean, as if there's not enough addictions out there already with social media. And now we're going to tell kids they can parlay their stuff and they can be on their phone even more. To me, that's killing my mojo for sports, is the gambling and the gambling ads and this bet and that bet. I think it's just terrible. I went to a Giants game once. I was in college, and my then future brother-in-law invited me to a Giants game, and they did like a little bet. And like, I didn't have much money in college or anything, and I think I bet like $20 on the game. And I couldn't enjoy the game because I was all stressed out that I was going to lose my bet. And ever since then, betting just killed. But anyway, so why did you get away from announcing 2 years ago?
Well, I agree with you about the ads on the radio, and the Yankees are, they're kings at it. They're very good at it, But the best way I can explain it, Jerry, is there was a guy who worked in Chicago, and one of the most fun parts of my job was when newspapers were kings, was that every major newspaper had a national college football writer, and that was my club, and we didn't all go to the same game every week, but whoever was there, and this was before the internet, you'd write your preview before you went to town. You'd go to town Friday. We'd play golf on the college campus golf course. We'd go to dinner. get hammered, wake up, stumble into the press box, write our stories, go home the next morning. I had a great fun doing that. But I'm in my 20s and 30s. There was an older guy who worked in Chicago, and he would walk in to the press box, and he had on like a Columbo raincoat, and he would just sort of sling his laptop onto the counter, and his shoulders would be slumped. And you could tell he was just he was mailing it in. He didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And I just remember looking at him thinking, I'm not going to be that guy.
Right.
And by 22, I could tell I was beginning to be that guy. And I could feel I wasn't as committed as I always had been, that I was like, okay, I'm at this stadium, I'm going to write this story, and I'm going to go home. And I just wasn't as into it. And I stepped away.
But you said that was in your 20s?
No, I said, well, I saw this guy when I was in my 20s. And then a couple of years ago, I realized I was becoming that guy. Mm-hmm. And I just decided, and nobody ever said to me, your stories, what's wrong with your stories? I mean, I was professional, and
you're going to meet your commitments.
Yeah, but I could just tell I was I was getting, I didn't have I felt like my fastball wasn't as good as it had been, and I was getting people out with junk, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And so So
what was the reason, like, when you look back on it?
I just think I'd been doing the same thing since 1987.
And
the sport was changing, and I had to decide, did I want to cover the portal and NIL and what players are making and colleges going to Congress to try to help them make the decisions that they were, wouldn't make for themselves, and I didn't want to cover that. I didn't care about any of it. I just didn't want to cover it. Yeah. So I just thought, you need to get out. Yeah. And I called and just said, and they On3 had talked to me about covering more of the business side of things.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah.
Let's part now. And I went downstairs and said to Meg, my wife, I just told them I'm out. And she said, so you're retired? I said, no, I'm not retired. I'm going to write.
Yeah.
She said, so you're going to write, just nobody's going to pay you? I said, yeah, you got it. Yeah. So I thought, I better go sell that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the book I sold.
Yeah. So when I think about retiring, I mean, first of all, I think it's important to keep busy, but for what I do, and I don't want to talk about myself too much, but we represent people that need it, that need help. They're in bad times in their lives, and we get really good results, and we do really good jobs for people. And I feel like that people have a certain calling in life. You're called to do a certain thing, and I feel like if I just got like fat and rich and just went and sat somewhere, that I would be betraying my calling in life. And a short way of saying it is, I feel like people need me. I know people need me. We get calls every day, and we can't help all the people just because of bandwidth issues and just the realities of the world. But for me, I don't think I could really ever retire, at least anytime soon. Number one, I can't, there's only so many waves I can surf, or only so many rounds of golf one can play before,
Yes.
And secondly, I feel like people need me out there. I feel like I would be wasting my talents.
Well, and look, I mean, I didn't feel like I was a really good writer until I was about your age, and that was because it was always in my head too much, and once I finally stopped trying to prove I was good and just trusted my own voice,
right,
then I was a good writer, and it just took me a long time to trust myself and to trust that voice, and to not, my early career, I was a fact checker at Sports Illustrated in my 20s, and wanted desperately to be a writer at Sports Illustrated
Yeah.
because in the 80s, Sports Illustrated was the place to be.
Yeah,
And I got an entry-level job there.
especially the swimsuit issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't good enough to write for Sports Illustrated in the 80s. I needed to go out and write.
But what makes a good writer though? Like in the 80s, like, and who's to say one's better than the other? Is it just like I read your book about your son. As I said, I'm like 60% through it. More than I'm like almost 70%. And I felt it was good writing because it was such an easy read. First of all, I teared up about 5 times. You know, it's terrible. You know, and just relating it to my life and my kids. And you know, when I saw Jed pull up today, I took an extra look at him. You know, because of what you wrote about.
Good.
And I, you know, I got my ears pricked up now.
Yeah.
My kids, if I see anything, you know, I jump on it because of what you wrote. And as I'm reading your book, I'm thinking about my life, and there's so many parallels. You know, you and I met in person this morning, and I told you when I called you, I feel like I kind of know you already just from reading, and there's so many similarities in our lives. Yeah. But so I thought it was good reading because it rolled off the tongue. Not that I was speaking it, but it just flowed. And I had to hit the dictionary a few times to learn some words, but there were well-placed good words like in there that I didn't understand, and it expanded my vocabulary, and it was easy to read. But what makes a good writer, like in the 80s or 90s at Sports Illustrated? Like what is
Well, the same thing that makes a good writer now. I just didn't have those skills yet. And
which is what are they looking for?
I
Is the
think
editor like, you
I
should
always
use-
felt like I had to tell you what happened in the game. And a good story it's not what happened in the game. It's me telling you what was important that happened in the game, and learning to trust what I saw and what I thought was important. And rather than tell you everything that happened in the game, picking one or two things that happened that explain the game as a whole and what it meant and what the result means.
both individually for the players and the team and
whatever.
whatever the storyline is.
Trust my voice.
Yeah.
It just took me a long time to understand that. And I would, I wrote on deadline for many, 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 many years, and I wasn't very good at it for many, many, many years. And I finally, because I was trying to cram everything in because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. We were taught to write what was called basically the wire service way of writing. You stay out of your story.
Right.
You just present everything that happened, and unless you're a columnist in a newspaper, you don't give your opinions. And it took me a long time to understand, and journalism changed, especially with the advent of the internet. It became much more, if not opinionated, at least you could filter it more through your own sensibilities. It took me a long time to get to that point where I would trust myself to say, I'm going to write about that thing, and that's what's important. And the fact that they scored on a 37-yard pass play with 8:16 left in the second quarter, if that's really important to the reader, let them read the box score. And that's what all good writers do. It just took me a long time to figure out that I should trust myself to tell the reader what I thought was important.
So you're taking a 3-hour event,
Yes,
a 2-hour event, and you're packaging it and molding it
into 800, 1,000 words. Yeah.
That does what exactly? Just summarizes the
summarize,
highlights, or tells a story, or
you're telling a story. You're giving the reader what was important about what happened and what it means, and what they should take away from it. And it may not, what they should take away from it may not have anything to do with what happened in the game. I mean, or in the play-by-play of the game. One of my favorite game stories I wrote was a Kansas State Baylor game in 2012, I think. Just because Kansas State was number one and Baylor beat the hell out of them. I think final score was 52-28. And, rather than explain all the points Baylor scored, it was okay, this was a big upset. Kansas State was at the top, and they're not at the top anymore. And how did they react to being at the top and not being at the top anymore? And just, and I kind of just finally figured out it was okay to just put people on my back and let them see what I was seeing, and let them know what I was thinking.
Is that
some guys could do that in their 20s? It took me a long time to figure that out.
Is that a pure exercise, or is that influenced by outside forces? So, and what I mean by that is, I stopped watching the news after November of, I guess it was this year or last year or whatever, after the election. And I was really tired of, cable news where an event would happen, a political event would happen, a speech, a debate, whatever. That would happen. We'd throw that away. And then we would have these heads tell me the meaning of what I just saw or just heard.
Yeah.
And clearly not a pure exercise, because they're clearly advocating. They clearly have an agenda.
Yes.
So you're not getting a pure distilled view of just what just happened on the cable news networks. You're getting a skewed. It's clearly not pure. Is it different in sports writing? And I think with all the things going on today, with all the tribalism and all the angst in the country, is sports seems to be a respite from that, where everyone can be in a stadium on behalf of one team, and no one cares about their political thing, at least for that time.
Right.
Is that a real thing? And is that exercise of distilling down the game in your years and experience, is it a pure exercise, or are you influenced by some betting company or by some one editor that wants you to push a certain team, or a coach that's looking for a job and needs a good write-up? I have no idea, but are there influences like that in your writing, or is it a pure thing?
Well, people used to ask me who I was rooting for, and I would say, I'm rooting for me. I'm rooting for the best story. And my agenda was to get you to the last word of the last paragraph. That's all I cared about. And I was going to make jokes. I was going to be flip. I was going to be serious where I thought it warranted to be serious, but I just wanted to write an entertaining story. And I was, the other luxury I had in my business was, as covering national college football, I was generally a front runner. I was going to the good teams. I wasn't going to see. I did cover Rutgers games, but I wasn't going to go see. It was usually when they were playing Ohio State. That's not true. I just said that for a joke. But 3-7 Rutgers playing 4-6 Boston College, I wasn't going to be anywhere near there. If you're covering Rutgers, you got to figure out how to cover that, and you got to figure out how to maintain your relationships with the people at Rutgers, even though you're writing about defeat after defeat after screw up after screw up.
Who are you working for at this time exactly?
Wherever I was working.
Like where? Give me
well,
an example.
I worked. I didn't get to the national college football beat until I stopped my fact-checking job at Sports Illustrated. So in 1987, I went to work at the Dallas Morning News. And that's when I began covering college football in earnest.
And are you physically present in Dallas at the time?
Yes, yeah.
And then if there's a game, do you have to fly out to the game, or you can watch it and cover it?
I never had home games. No, I went to games because you have to be there. You have to be there.
Right.
To get the flavor of the event, to be able to talk to writers, talk to players and coaches afterward.
Are you one of those guys sitting in those primo seats with the laptop? Is that you? And then you get all kinds of data and analytics. Well, not analytics back then.
You get all kind of data. One of the big changes is they're not primo seats anymore. They've moved pretty much every press box to the end zone or the 20-yard line now to sell those primo seats. But back in my day, Jerry.
When you had to walk to school uphill both ways in 6 feet of snow.
Yeah.
Unlike today when they're dropped off.
We had, it was a lot. I had a lot of fun. And a lot of what I did is obsolete or doesn't occur anymore. I mean, the writing on deadline, because you had to have your story in by 10:30 so that it could be printed by 11:30 so that it could be in your driveway by 6 a.m. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, later in my career, I had a deadline, but it was only because my editor wanted to go home and they wanted to get the story up as fast as possible.
Yeah, and so like today, if it happened at 9 p.m., it's old news by 6 a.m. the next day.
Exactly. And a lot of game stories have changed in that regard, and the structure of game stories have changed. And the internet changed everything about my business, and not and it's just different. Newspapers were a lot of fun and very important, and they're now pretty much obsolete.
So you're in Dallas. You're located in Dallas. So then you got to go cover a game. Do you get the choice of the primo games? Like, how does that work?
I did. Obviously,
because
my
you're
editor,
a good writer.
Well, if you're going to have a national college football beat, you're going to depend on your national writer to tell you what's the most important game to cover that week.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then you jump on a plane, you go. Like, let's say the game's usually Saturdays, are they?
Games are Saturdays.
So you get there, what, Friday?
I would usually go Friday. Sometimes I went Thursday. It would depend whether I could get anything done for a story by getting there Thursday. But generally access to players was shut off by midweek. So when I went back to Sports Illustrated as a writer 10 years after I left, a lot of times I would get to campus on Friday and they would let me talk to players because I was Sports Illustrated.
Right.
And what they used to do.
Did you have a badge like that says Sports Illustrated?
They knew who I was. So what would happen, and what happens to this day, is that
I remember, just real quick, when I was in college, I interned for Bob Dole in the United States Senate as a junior in college.
Oh, cool.
And, I was just a kid. I'm like, what the heck is this? This is really cool. And you'd see these guys walking. I'm like, I see that guy on TV all the time. So I guess you were one of those guys.
Yeah.
We
have something in common. I once got a speeding ticket in Russell, Kansas. So,
okay.
The birthplace of Bob Dole.
Yes.
On Fridays, the networks show up to do their interviews to show during the game. So players can do interviews on Fridays if they're being paid a lot of money by the people doing the interviews. But what they would do is, because I was Sports Illustrated, they would let me either sit in with the networks if the networks were cool with it, or I would just grab the player when he was done for the 10 minutes that CBS or ESPN needed him, and I'd get to pull him aside for 5 or 10 minutes for what I needed. So that was, that's how it worked back then, but I went to great games. Every major college football game between 1987 and 2022, there's a pretty decent chance I was there. And I can list any number. That was 36 years. In that time, I went to 37 national championship games, because there were a couple of years where there was more than one national champion.
Are you supposed to be impartial as you're sitting there?
Sure. Yeah.
Was that? I mean, you're human. It couldn't have been like. I
Well,
mean, it's probably hard for the refs to be impartial sometimes, let alone a writer.
Well, look, I grew up an Alabama fan because my parents went to Alabama, and then I went to Stanford. So obviously Stanford has a place in my heart.
Yeah.
On the selection committee now, I had to recuse myself from Stanford, and maybe that recusal will come into play over the next 3 years. I tend to doubt it. And I recused myself from Notre Dame because Marcus Freeman, the head coach, wrote a blurb for the book. So for this year, I recused myself from Notre Dame. I didn't recuse myself from Alabama. I wrote about Alabama for 35 years, and most of the time, Alabama was really good. So, but there were times when they weren't really good, and there were times, when I wrote about them and they weren't very good. But that's what I did. What it enabled me to do is I had so much understanding of both the history and the meaning of Alabama football that I felt like it helped me do a better job, because I knew how important it was to people, because that's the way I grew up.
So not to go back to this, but I'm just again curious: is that history and meaning still there?
Absolutely,
given the NIL and the turnover.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that stadium that was 43,000 seats when I was growing up is now 101,000 seats, and that campus that had maybe 18,000 students when I would have applied to Alabama, which I didn't because my older brother was already there and already knew which bars to go to and what classes to take. And I thought, well, there's no mystery here for me. And to get back to an earlier point, if I had gone to Alabama, I would be socially stratified into what fraternity I could join and who I hung out with.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't go to Alabama. But that 18,000 student population is now about 38,000.
Yeah.
Nick Saban blew up that school, and he made it a national school, and they get a lot of kids from up here.
Yeah. So if you're doing the national college football beat and you're going to the games, Saturday games, flying in, what are you doing during the week? Are you studying those teams and trying to get to know the players and determine what the potential storylines are?
Well, that if you're covering the beat, that anyway. I mean, that's part of knowing the beat. But I would, in Dallas, I had a blank page in the Wednesday section, a full blank broadsheet page that I had to fill with college football notes.
Wow.
And a lot of what I did was, there would be conference calls with coaches from every conference, on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. You'd listen to those. If you needed a specific coach, you could ask them a question. You're calling other writers. You're reading about other games, and, that may not be as important to be in the Sunday paper, but it was a good note that would work in the Wednesday paper, for somebody who's a college football fan. And Dallas is a huge college football town, so there was a lot of interest. So I would write generally the Wednesday notes. I would write a preview of whatever game I was going to cover. I'd write a game story. And then, as it got closer, and all the time, Jerry, you're writing features on, big players or big coaches or what we would call takeouts, longer pieces. So, that was fun.
I'm fascinated by it. There's so much I want to ask. Jed, how are we on time? Because we're good. We got hour 24. All right. So then you're doing the beat for the Dallas Morning News, and then you move to New York.
Yes, that was when my wife said we're moving up here, and I agreed with her. So what happened was a buddy of mine who had been at Newsday got a job at Sports Illustrated, and so his job covering national colleges was open. So I went in and said to her, "There's a job at Newsday open," and she said, "Well, I don't want to live on Long Island." And I said, "Well, that's the job that's open, but I probably don't have to live on Long Island."
It's New York Newsday?
At that time, it was New York Newsday, but
right.
It was the mothership was in Melville, and I went there in '94, and we moved to Connecticut, and then in '97, I went back to Sports Illustrated, covering national colleges, and I did that, Jerry, as I said earlier, I was going to prove I could be a writer at Sports Illustrated, and I was there 5 years, and it mimicked my first 5-year tour of Sports Illustrated, in that it started out great, and I grew to hate it, and I couldn't wait to leave. And Sports Illustrated was a tough place to work, for me anyway, and maybe for a couple of others.
Did these jobs pay well? Like
it paid? No,
the Dallas Morning News and this. It's just a big salary, or how do you get paid?
Well, Dallas got I was making a decent,
I don't need numbers.
I was making a decent salary at Dallas. I moved up here. My salary increased almost, not quite doubled, because the standard of living was higher up here, and salaries were higher up here.
Yeah.
When I went to Sports Illustrated, it almost doubled again.
Okay, got it.
But it was just a very tough place to work. It was a very it was not collegial. Newsrooms, by and large, are collegial places, and everybody got along. And the writers at Sports Illustrated got along, but the editors, it just felt they made it all feel very competitive. And
Was SI based in New York?
SI was based in the Time Life building across the street from Radio City. It was part of Time Life.
Well, New York is by its nature more cutthroat than anywhere else.
Yes, and this was more cutthroat. And I knew that because I had been there before. But, as I said, I was going to prove I could do it. And I went, and I almost left the business. I was so disheartened by just the relationships that, the editors and how they treated me and how they treated my work. And I thought about leaving. At the end, I couldn't pull the trigger because I understood I still wanted to write, and what I would have gone to do was work with my brother, and we would have killed each other. So.
Are you doing the same thing at Sports Illustrated, where you're doing the college beat? And
I was covering colleges. There were two. I was working now in tandem with the guy I replaced at Newsday, who was and is a very good friend.
Yeah.
But I just didn't get along with the editor I had.
And so how does that work? So you go to a game, you put your heart and soul into it, you do your research, you write it a certain way, and he's like, I don't like that. Do it this way. Take this out. Put that there.
Yeah, the Sports Illustrated, as most magazines were, newspapers belong to the writer.
Right.
Magazines belong to the editor.
More flashy, I guess.
Well, editors have always had more control over what goes into, because there's more time to work on it.
Is the editor considered the writer's boss?
The structure was there was a managing editor of the magazine that was in charge of everything. Then below him, there were assistant managing editors who each had several sports on their bailiwick. And then each sport had a sport-specific editor.
Yeah.
So the guy I dealt with day to day was the college football editor.
Yeah.
And there were actually two college football editors. And I got along with one. I didn't get along with the other. And we didn't, the Southern word is we didn't Joe-reen. We didn't get along.
Yeah.
You know? So,
well, I think also growing up in the South, and one of the things you said in your book is, you talk slow so they think you're stupid. But the South, I always feel like they're more homey, they're more, Southern hospitality, whereas New York is more bam,
Well, but there have been plenty of people in the South who've done very well in New York. I don't know that had anything. I think it had to do more with my personality. I don't like confrontation, and
right.
and New York is about confrontation. I lived there. I lived there in my 20s. I get that, but anyway.
Yeah.
In 2002, this always kills me because it was really only 2002. It wasn't that long ago. A buddy of mine who was an editor at ESPN's website said to me, "We are thinking of hiring a college football writer, one for ESPN.com. Is that something you would be interested in?" And I thought, I really want to write for a website? I mean, who takes them seriously?
This is in 2002.
Yeah. It was 2002. And I finally decided, well, it's ESPN.
Yeah.
And they have credibility, and I'll go there. And maybe if I go there, I'll get to be on television.
Yeah. Okay.
And little did and I had no way of understanding this and was not prescient about it at all, but the internet killed print, and my career extended for probably at least 10 years, if not more, because I took that leap.
What did Meg say about that leap when you were trying to make the decision, your wife?
Well, she understood how miserable I was, so anything that was going to change that, she was for. And I made a little bit more money at ESPN and went on to make a lot more money. So she was totally in favor of it. And she was in favor of what, she was going to let me make that decision. And, I got to ESPN and I kind of figured out fairly quickly I didn't like being on television. I didn't like the way it took me a long time to be comfortable in front of a camera. Again, it took me a long time to be a good writer. It took me a long time to figure out how to be comfortable in front of a camera. And by the time I figured it out, they didn't want anything to do with me anymore because I had been on and wasn't very good.
And when you're on camera, were you doing play-by-play or
Oh,
color
no,
or
I was just
commentating?
I was, you go to Sports Center and there's a sports specific.
Oh, this is what just happened.
Yeah.
Or this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I would go in and I would, and they
halftime.
tried me on game day. I was on game day once and I was hideous. I mean, I was just peeing in my pants. I was so nervous, and they could see that, and they're like, "Get his ass out of there!" Yeah.
Especially the New York people.
Yeah. So, and by the time I figured out how, and a lot of me being comfortable writing on camera, et cetera, really happened after Max died, after my son died, because I thought all that shit I thought was important. It's just not that important. I don't care anymore. And once I just relaxed, I was fine.
I've learned in competition and in test taking, in a pressure situation, because I still do, I row competitively and different things. We were talking about that a little bit before.
Yeah.
That it's important to half not give a shit.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah.
If you care too much, and when we're doing trials, like when we're in court.
Yeah.
If it looks like you want to win a little too much, the jury's going to be like, what's up? In a trial, you almost have to, in a way, not half give a shit, or at least give that appearance. And then there's a certain confidence that exudes from that. And I think that's an important lesson in life.
No, you're right. And I was...
And going back to spirituality and stuff.
Yeah.
I think why spirituality is important, I feel like if I go as a Catholic, I'm supposed to go to church on Sunday. So I'll go to church on Sunday. And sometimes I'll miss, if just busy or whatever. And when I miss, I'm kind of messed up for the week,
Interesting.
And it kind of gets, and then little life pressures will seem to be all that much harder. And I feel like going to church and having, praying and having the priest talk about not this life, but the next life and the relationships that we have with people, that it reminds you of what's really important. What's not important is the car and the status and what's going to happen tomorrow. One thing I heard about, I read somewhere, you're big on kind of getting quotes and things that apply in life. And one quote that's really stuck with me for a while is, "The future is God's territory, and the price for trespassing is anxiety."
That's really good.
So, like, if you think about the future, oh shit, what's going to happen tomorrow? Oh, what if this happens? That's not your territory. That's God's territory. And the penalty for trespassing is anxiety.
Oh yeah, no, I was, and I was so into my head and getting in my own way.
And when you're reminded of what's important in life,
yes.
the relationships, the time you had with Max, the time that you wish you had more time with him, or just those little moments, you realize that's what is important. And then in our professional life, it's like it's more relaxed, and a relaxed player is a dangerous player.
Yes, no,
in sports and in life.
No, you're absolutely right, and.
Like pitching, they say to speed up the pitching, slow it down.
Yeah. Well, if you watch, you watch Schlittler's motion to the plate, it looks like he's going to fall asleep halfway through his windup, and then it comes in at 101 miles an hour. And he's a kid. So
you had that attitude. You learned that attitude after a while, after being on TV and.
Well, and I wasn't. Trust me, I was not on TV a lot, and it was more just, as I said earlier, trusting my own voice and just relaxing and understanding that I knew how to do it, and I knew how to write a story, and just trusting the story that I wanted to write, rather than worrying about, is this what the editor wants? How do I please the editor? Well, I please the editor by writing a good story, and it took me a very long time to figure that out.
So you're at so keep the story going forward in time. So you're at ESPN, you're writing, and
Yeah, so I'm writing, and you know, I was college football writer number one. You know, probably within 10 years, we had about 20 or 25 college football writers.
Still on ESPN.com?
Still on ESPN.com, and
Right.
there are fewer now. But, you know, I have an evolutionary theory of journalism, which I think is right historically, and you know, and it's that radio showed up in the 20s and lasted about 30 years until television came up, and network television was king for about 30 years, and then cable television came up, and cable television was king for about 30 years, and the internet came up, and we're about now 15 years since the internet's been dominant. So, you know, what's going to be next? But my point being, ESPN, you know, in 2010, ESPN, and I'm guessing the year and guessing the number, but it was 2010, 2011, ESPN had 113 million homes paying $8 a month. They turned the lights on. They got $1 billion just for turning the lights on every month. And now there's about 60 million homes that are paying ESPN. They're paying more than $8 a month now, but that's, you know.
To access the online content.
No, cable.
Okay. Oh, it's reducing.
Yeah, cable, there are about half the number of cable subscribers that there were 15 years ago.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Cables, yeah.
And so ESPN is trying to figure out where do we get our revenue. You know, this new streaming thing they're trying to sell for $30 or $40 a month, whatever it is. That's their answer. But, you know, that wave we were riding 15 years ago, that ESPN's the king and the website and cable will be king forever. You know, it's right back to your point about the future. You know, who I can remember walking, Jerry, the parking lot in Dallas to access the building. We would go up the stairs by the loading dock, and there would be these enormous rolls of newsprint. You know, that if they had, you know, it was like a cartoon thing. You know, it was like a steamroll thing that would have mowed you down and killed you.
Yeah.
And they were just stacked up by the loading dock.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at them every day as I walked into the newsroom and thinking, I should invest in the newsprint business, in the newsprint company, because whoever's growing those trees, that's going to be needed forever. You know,
I feel
not
like
so much.
I feel like growing up the youngest of 13 kids, that I was able to see the things that my older siblings went through and mistakes they made.
Yeah.
And I was able to avoid them. And I feel like I've had this thing where I can envision evolution a little bit. And I remember I was at Blockbuster Video with Dodie, my wife, but we were in high school at the time, dating in high school. And we used to love just going to Blockbuster Video and pulling out a video, and we'd walk through and look and browse and pull out a big VHS. And I remember one day I said to her, I think at some point they turned into CDs, and I said to her, like, this business is not going to be around very long. Why do they have all these up on things and I got to walk around? Why don't they just put the thing in a book? I'll flip through the book and say, that's the movie I want, and hand me the movie. And then lo and behold, 5-10 years later, Blockbuster goes out of way and Netflix came, where you would
red envelope,
and they'd send you the CD in the mail,
sure,
and you'd return it. And now that's way gone, and
that's way gone.
So the evolution is
it feels like it. You know, the cycles are getting faster.
Yeah, and the instant information, the social media. What advice do you have? Because I see these D1 players, I see these college kids, and they. Remember the Bill Buckner? Remember Bill Buckner?
Sure, yeah.
You remember, like I think it was the World Series,
86,
the Mets and the thing, and it goes under, and the Mets lose. I think Mookie Wilson scores.
Mets won, yeah.
The Mets win the World Series, or at least that game. And then
it was Game 6.
And then they won Game 7, I think.
Yes,
right?
I was there. Yeah.
You were there at the Bill Buckner?
When I was at Sports Illustrated as a fact checker, I covered baseball.
Yeah.
Those first 5 years I was out of school. I mean,
Were you at that game at Chase
I was
Stadium?
at that game at Chase Stadium. I was at every game of that series. You know.
Did you feel bad for Bill Buckner? I mean,
Of course.
he had to move to like Oregon or something.
Oh yeah.
After that.
Yeah, I think it was Idaho or somewhere up in the Northwest. Yeah, no, I mean, because he's one of the great goats of the, before, GOAT is now greatest of all time. Back then, a GOAT was a guy who made a really bad mistake.
So do you have any advice for the kids then that, you go on social media and like if Jesus Christ or Mahatma Gandhi were posting on social media, they would get a lot of hate comments just because it's the nature of social media. So do you have any advice for kind of the young kids and the D1 players that maybe they just shouldn't read the bullshit that's posted on social media?
Of course.
Because there's such pressure in sports and stuff.
I was, I had 135,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm no longer on Twitter. I just turned it off. I thought, I don't need this, and nobody really, especially after I stopped working, nobody really got after me.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is just so toxic. And, I don't, I post on Facebook and I post on LinkedIn, but I don't post on Instagram because, and my daughters are, especially when the book about Max came out, they said, Dad, you need to be on Insta. And I'd say, I don't think visually. I think verbally. I can't, you're asking me to do video stuff. It's not how my brain presents a subject.
One thing you said in the book, is it okay if we say Max's book or the book about Max?
Yeah. Sure.
One thing you said in there is when, your friends and family were giving condolences and stuff, the one thing that meant more was the handwritten notes than emails.
Yes.
And I feel like the social media and the electronic communication, it's not really like a genuine human interaction.
No, I would agree.
And our neighbor just wrote us a really nice note because they had a baby and we got them some food and stuff. She wrote us a really nice note and put it, and I have it in the kitchen. It's just sitting there, and I feel like a handwritten note, a pen to thing. It's just so much more meaningful, especially than emails, because emails is like work, and you're just trying to delete them and get them down and get rid of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. No, I think to this day, a handwritten note or a thank you note goes probably longer than it used to because they're rarer than they used to be.
Yeah. All right. So then, so along the way, you have I don't want to talk too much. I want to mostly talk about, the American Coach book, and you have an event coming up, but I do want to hit on
Sure.
Max's book a little bit too, in the sense that we had on here Sue Talone, and Sue Talone is now running a thing called the Samaritan Center in New Jersey. It's in Monmouth County, New Jersey, and I think it was about 2007 or so. She came on the show and she talked about the suicide contagion that happened at the Jersey Shore. In one high school in our community, we lost 12 kids over several years. And she talked about the importance of that. And one of the biggest things, I also had a nephew that passed away. I know you don't like the idea passed away. He died. And he died from, I think drug overdose is a euphemism because I think any amount of an illegal drug is an overdose, because especially fentanyl and things like that, because one hit of fentanyl can kill you.
Sure.
It's not like, oh, shoot, it was an overdose. I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
I just didn't take too much. Like if you take any of it, it's too much. But my nephew's family didn't hide it. They talked about it. And I think that's so important to educate the survivors, to educate the kids that are around, to learn that, if you're in a multi-million-dollar house partying, the drug, the pills are just as dangerous as if you're shooting heroin in an alley somewhere.
Sure.
And to educate that so that it can prevent others. And one of the big points that Sue Talone was making was that, if you get sick, you got a cold, or you get a flu, you go to the doctor, or you twist your ankle, you go to the doctor. Of course, and we talk about it. But in the sense of mental illness, and maybe it's less today, but there's a stigma about it, and we don't immediately go and treat it. And that was one point that she made, and it's
Yeah,
a thing that you spoke
absolutely.
about in your book about Max. So there's some things that you can talk about that to
Sure.
help prevent others and takeaways from that to kind of, as I told you, I look at my kids, and I give them a double look to make sure they're okay. But is there things that you can talk about along the lines of that with this in that?
Sure. And the book, I keep trying to catch his eye. It was about Max, but it was really about grief and how I learned to live with grief and how I learned to help people who are grieving, because I was terrible at it. Well, I wasn't terrible at it. I just didn't do it. I was scared. I was petrified of it, both grieving and comforting people who are grieving. But, and before I get into that, to your point, the brain is an organ, just like the kidney and the liver. And when there's something wrong, if you're not thinking right, if your brain is telling you that you're better off dying, you're not thinking right, and you need to go get help. And that's, and Max tried to get help, and he died as a junior at RIT in Rochester, and he was talking to the mental health professionals on campus. But he told them that he still was making plans for the future, so they didn't think he was suicidal. And I don't know whether he told them that to get him off the scent, or if he really did have plans and he just made a snap decision. We don't know.
Yeah, he was concerned about his tests, so I got to do my tests. I got to finish my work.
Right. So they and they whiffed, and we all whiffed. It was all just a big whiff. But what I learned about grief was, and to your point of your Ray, your nephew and his family, you gotta let it out. Grieving is if you try to hold it in, or if you try to not do it, who are you going to tell, or who are you going to talk to it about? I don't want to talk to it in public. I don't want to talk about it in public. Well, where do you draw that line? And then you're holding on to it, and you're holding it in, and that's not, you hold it in. Anything you hold, you get tired after a while, of holding it. And so I just thought I got way too much to worry about. That's way more important than I'm going to, tell family but not friends, or I'm going to tell family and friends but not acquaintances, or I'm going to tell family and acquaintances, not strangers.
About the truth of what happened.
Yeah.
About how we died.
And how do I got to keep track of who knows what.
Right.
Let's see. You're a second cousin, what do I tell you?
Yeah.
So.
And as a journalist, you don't want to be like, no comment. That would go
Exactly.
against your grain.
Yeah. And, Max was missing his body was missing because he ended his life by going into Lake Ontario in the middle of winter. So we did not recover his body for several weeks, and the poor fisherman came across it. So I just thought, I'm going to be open about it, and if that's too uncomfortable for somebody, that's not my problem. I got enough problems. And so I'm just going to talk about it. Then I don't have to worry about whether I'm telling the truth or not, or who I'm talking to about it. And what did it matter, Jerry? What difference did it make? Even if I didn't tell anybody, or if I told everybody, he still wasn't coming back. He still wasn't here. And, that was the thing that I had to deal with. The rest of it was just ancillary to me, and
just societal image bullshit.
Yeah, and I kind of,
as if those people don't have problems, Everyone's got problems.
And conversely, the number of people that came up to me after Max died and would say, my brother or my sister or your nephew, and you realize, and that helped me a lot, because I realized where they're functioning. They seem completely normal and functioning to me, and yet they've been carrying this around for a number of years. And here I am, 3 weeks into it, trying to just get out of bed every day. And so that sort of gave me hope too. So it was, and the biggest lesson of grief is, as pertains to marriage, everybody trots out a statistic that if you
get divorced.
You get divorced. That half the couples who lose a child get divorced.
And your daughter Sarah came to you and read that and said, "Oh shit, are you guys going to get divorced?"
Yeah, the week Max disappeared, she was living in San Francisco. It was her first year out of school, and she got off the plane, and we were still in the airport.
And I think you said in your book, like she filled like 2 bookshelves of what to do when this happens.
She and Meg both. Meg read every book. Sarah read a lot of books and immediately went into grief counseling, fairly immediately. Elizabeth, it took a little longer. Elizabeth is much more inward than Sarah. But excuse me, the point is everybody grieves differently. And what gets couples in trouble is judging one another's grief. Oh, she's always crying. He never cries. Oh, he goes to the cemetery once a week. I'm going 3 days a week. Well, everybody does it differently. And we just decided we weren't going to judge one another, and we decided we were going to try not to cry at the same time, and so that sort of made us protective of one another. If she was really struggling, or if I was really struggling, the other one would sort of go into,
the shoulder to lean on mode.
The shoulder to lean on, and okay, I'll take over from here. And I resumed. I was able to get on with my life, if for lack of a better phrase, faster than Meg. And I think she would agree with that. She might not. But I went to work and ESPN was wonderful. They just said, come back when you're ready. And, paid me the whole time.
You talk in the book, this is the bullshit, the club no one wants to join, and how to survive or manage through the club no one wants to join, which is nothing worse than burying a son or a child.
Sure, yeah, exactly. And I went back to work. So Max died in February. I think I actually went out to do a story in June, so it wasn't even 6 months. And the first guy I went to see, was a football coach at Oregon. And, I sat down, I did the interview and we finished. He said, I got a question to ask you. And I said, what? He said, how are you doing? And I just fell apart. I just, lost it. But, I was obviously really fragile, but I needed to go back to work anyway. I needed something to do. And I felt, ESPN wasn't going to pay me forever. And I thought working would help me. I knew we had to move on. And, I knew that we couldn't stay where he was. And, how can you go ahead and work? Well, me not working is not going to bring Max back. And no matter what happens, me staying, if I stay where he was, try to stay where he was, then I'm losing again because I'm missing out all the stuff that's happening now.
You describe it like a hurricane hits a town and you clean it up, but the scars are still there.
Yeah.
And if you didn't move on and continue with your life and continue to be a father and a husband and a provider and all that, it's like you're not cleaning up after the hurricane. You're just leaving it there and letting it get worse.
Yeah. No, I totally believe that, Jerry. And Meg was slower to that. Meg, she still struggles with, there was something she could have done. And she understands it was a mental illness, and she understands, the brain is an organ. She still feels like she was his mother. She should have known there was something she should have done. and I just say to her, well, he was sick, and I said, of course I have regrets, but I have regrets about things that I did with our daughters. I have regrets about interactions you and I have had. The difference is you're still here, but I don't think that my regrets about what happened between me and Max had anything to do with him dying.
Listen, I don't know you other than reading your book and
Yeah.
just my common sense and speaking to you, but I agree with you. Like, I don't think Meg should feel that way. And it's hard as parents because, like, especially when they're in college and freshmen in college, like my daughter is a freshman in college and she asked to borrow a car to go pick up her friend, which is like a 2-hour drive. And I'm like, I tell her, no, you're not borrowing the car. You figure it out because of different reasons. And I want them to grow up and realize responsibility. And you got to figure out problems and you got to find a way to get a car. And I don't want to provide it to you. So it's that letting the kids go and pushing them out of the nest and letting them develop on their own versus I have these little demons in my head say, oh shit, what if she borrows a crappy car and it crashes and am I going to then have guilt that it's somehow my fault?
Yeah.
Or, she goes to the University of Miami talking about college game day. Geez, the college game day they had there, it's like a resort they just had at U Miami. But she's flying back and the United flight is $400, but the Spirit flight is $195. Well, of course, do the Spirit flight. But if the plane goes down because it's am I going to then have guilt and these are things that we deal with as parents. And of course it's not my fault or if because at some point we got to let our kids go, I guess. I don't know.
Well, Meg understands all that, and yet she's a mom, and that's what she struggles with, and I still struggle, when you're initially grieving, and you have that first moment where you're not thinking about it, you're like, oh my God, life is going to go on, and that might only last 5 minutes, and then. Time expands. Max has been dead for more than 10 years now.
Yeah, and 2015, right?
Yeah, it was February of 15, and when it will still rise up and slap me upside the head, and I don't have my guard up anymore. So sometimes when I start thinking about him now, I really almost have to sit down. But what I struggle with now is he would be 31 years old. Who would he be? I have no idea. And again, are you going to, we have him preserved in mental amber as a 21-year-old. That's not, he'd be somebody completely different by now. But we don't know who it is.
The love and grief is really interrelated, right? I think you were saying that you learned.
Well, yeah. To me. What made me more comfortable with grief was understanding that grief is just the form love takes after the person has gone. And there's a famous saying, grief is the price we pay for love.
That's it, yeah.
And it was, the way I read it was attributed to a priest in L.A. who worked in the barrio. And I don't... it's a lovely sentiment, but I don't agree with it because then it feels like it's punishing. It's something it's the price you pay, and I don't think that's the case. You grieve for someone. The more you grieve, it's generally because it's the more you loved them, and you have all this love for them, and they're not here anymore. And I think that works whether it's your child, your parent, or whomever. And thinking about grief as love really sanded off the sharp edges of it to me, and it just allowed me to be more comfortable with it, which I wasn't.
I hope you don't mind me saying this. It's just my belief and my opinion. Like my mother, she was elderly and passed away sometime, but some time ago, probably 7 years, and I firmly believe that that the human energy, the human spirit lives on. I firmly feel her talking to me, not in the sense that I'm hearing voices, but in the sense of that unspoken presence, communication. I know, and I guess it sounds trite, and there's nothing one can say to console when you lose a child, such as they're in a better place.
Yeah.
But
That one was always a peach.
yeah, yeah. But to me, my mother was in a lot of pain. She had a lot of arthritis and stuff, and my brother was there when she actually died. Actually, the last thing she said is she was yelling at me because my mother yelled a lot as the youngest of 13, and I was rubbing her feet the night before she died, and when she's like on her deathbed, and she's like, "Will you stop it?" And I'm like, whatever. And I had also opened the window. It was in August. And because I love, I figure she'll want the nice summer breeze, the summer air. And she's, will you close that window? and literally, and then I'm like, all right, Mom. And I shut the window because it was a little humid, I guess.
Yeah.
But I figured it's summer and she's got to be in this goddamn bed. And why not give her a little sense of some summer air? Because I know she loved the summers. And that's the last goddamn thing she did was yell at me for rubbing her feet and opening the window. And then she died the next morning. But my brother Leo was there when she died. And he said that you could just see all the pain leave her face.
Nice.
And she had a lot of pain. She had a lot of like emotional pain, and she had a lot of physical pain. And I firmly believe, and I had a bad relationship with my mother over the years. Like, it wasn't the best thing. She was a great mother in some ways, but other ways, she was a bit tough.
Yeah.
And so I have that. But I feel her still talking to me, communicating to me. I feel she's there. And not to be trite, but I feel like she's in a painless and a better place. And I firmly believe I will see her again. And I feel like, and not to go down this rabbit hole, but I really think there's something to people on their deathbed when they see their family and they say that, like, oh, Grandpa or Upa. She said Upa, which is her grandfather. My mother did. And when her father did it as well, he sat up in bed and reached for his mother. And then, it's kind of emotional stuff. But if you look at that stuff, like, there's common threads with that. And I really believe that. Like, I believe there's an afterlife.
Well, I hope so.
I
would love to think that Max was with his grandparents now. There's some comfort in that thought. We don't know.
There's just too much empirical data that supports it in the sense of, and it's not anecdotal. It's studies and stuff about people when they could. But anyway, So let's move past that if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So you continue on, you bounce back, and you're still, and then you then retire not retire, but then you move on to spending more time writing. And tell us about that.
Well, so this book emanated out of in 2019.
How many books have you written?
I have written
roughly.
This is 5.
Okay.
I co-wrote a book and I ghost wrote a book. So if you include those, I've written 5.
Got it.
This was the biggest one I have taken on to this point, and it emanated out of the College Football 150 project we did at ESPN in 2019, which was the year of the 150th anniversary of college football. And John Dahl was the producer of all the 30 for 30 documentaries at ESPN.
Those are great. I love the Requiem for the Big East. That's my favorite one.
Everybody, that was a great one. Yeah, so John was the producer, executive producer of that. He was the boss. And 2016, he and I found one another and found that we were interested in what can we do about the 150th anniversary of the sport. And if we were going to do it anywhere, we were going to do it at ESPN. And we got the go-ahead from the bosses, and we started working on it. And at that time, I wasn't working on it exclusively. But, to make a short story long, we ended up producing 33 hours of programming pertaining to the history of the game, which ESPN still runs to this day, 6 years later. And out of that research, because I was in charge of all the content that went into the shows, I just noticed that Frank Leahy had the second best winning percentage of all time when he retired in 1953 to Rockne, who he played for. He still has the second best winning percentage to Rockne. And Rockne is an iconic figure in America to this day. And Leahy is just a name in a record book. And so that was the thread I started to pull on. And then you mentioned earlier, it took him 13 years for his peers to elect him to the College Football Hall of Fame. And I thought, oh, what's up with that? That seems, and it basically was he beat the hell out of him, and he was not. He was
out of the competition.
Yeah, and they all kind of held a grudge, and he was a bit of an introvert. All coaches to a degree live in the gray area of the record book. Bear Bryant used to say he lived in the lines between the rules. And Leahy was very good at reading the rule book and figuring out what he could get away with. And again, I'm
sorry, but I got to go back to a Little League story.
Okay.
I was crazy like he was.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to study the rules and do it. And we did in Little League, we would do like in travel. We would do a slash bunt where we would bunt, pull the bat back, we'd bunt, all the infielders would run in, and then we'd pull the bat back and hit it, and we won a couple games that way, and the coaches were flipping out. And then the next season or shortly after, they instituted a rule that you couldn't do that. But anyway.
Yeah, that's baloney.
That seems a little bit what he was like.
And he was very he worked his players to the bone. He demanded that they take winning as seriously as he did. His whole life, Jerry, was essentially how can I win a football game, to the point, and again, as you said earlier, that at the expense of his health, at the expense of his family life, and by the age of 45, he could no longer physically coach. He was too sick, and just because his stress ate him up. But he was incredible. He made sure every player on the team knew every rule in the rule book, and there was a famous game when he was at Boston College in 1940, and they went undefeated, and they beat Georgetown, which was a national power as well at that point, and they were ahead 19-16, and they had to punt out of their own end zone, and the punter took the snap and just started running back and forth in the end zone, and the Georgetown didn't know they just froze. They didn't understand what he was doing, and he was getting time off the clock. And when they finally chased after him, then he stepped out of the end zone, and then it was 19-18 Boston College, and they punted from the 20-yard line. Well, if you're a football fan, you might understand what he was doing, but his guys knew the rules, and there was a lot less on-field. There was a lot less coaching by coaches then. A lot more decisions were made by players. And that was always a great example. I mean, one of the writers of the day said that he looked like a burglar casing a house. He was just running up and down the end zone, and but he had his players prepared.
Yeah. So he's like one of the most winningest coaches and didn't get much. It's a fascinating read. There's a ton of Notre Dame Irish in our area. So they should definitely pick this book up. So that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so, and I hope they come to Thunder Road.
All right. Yeah. So you have an event coming up. So that's Monday, October. Jed, what's the date? Monday, October
13th.
It's currently the 9th.
Yeah.
The event's on October 13th.
Do you know the time offhand? I think it's. Is it at evening or?
It's an evening event.
Okay.
And if it's either it's 6 or 6:30, it's on their website.
All right, so it's at Thunder Road
I
Books.
should know that, shouldn't I?
No, it's we're going to put it in the show notes. We're going to put a link to it. It's on it's at Thunder Road Books in Spring Lake, New Jersey. Basil Iwanek, the famous movie producer, is I believe an owner of that bookstore, and he gets a lot of great authors in there. So anyone wants to check it out. And what do you do with it? Is it a book signing? Do you do
I'll give a little talk about Leahy and then I'll sign books and people love to tell me their stories about Notre Dame, and I love hearing them because it's everything we talked about. They feel emotionally connected to Notre Dame, and it's just that's what makes college football so much fun.
Yeah, if you drive around our area, you'll see a lot of Notre Dame flags on houses.
Good.
Proudly doing that. So they say it's a bit of a cult, but that's okay. Cults are good sometimes, the football fans. But all right, Ivan Maisel, I really appreciate you coming on. It was so nice of you to come here, and especially nice of you to open up your heart to everyone. Not only about your life and your experiences, but all the other things we spoke about. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Jerry.